I think this is the other kind of part that is very confusing, at least it was to me. You will get strong by doing reps to failure and by training like a bodybuilder. You will. There's no question about it. But it is not the most efficient way, and it does not have a low biological cost on your body to train that way.
Our guest for this episode is Melissa Templeman. She's a former international level judo competitor who was ranked number 3 in the United States at 52 kilos while training to make the U.S. national team during the Rio Olympic cycle. Along that journey, she began to question how strength training could better support performance on the mat instead of taking away from it. That search led her to StrongFirst, where she became a StrongFirst Elite instructor and later achieved the Iron Maiden and Sinister standards. Today, Melissa is a strength coach, co-owner of Oakland's most powerful gym, and a Jiu-Jitsu black belt, and IBJJF Masters World Champion. In this conversation, we talk about strength as a skill, the right relationship with grit, and what martial artists should understand about training for the long game. Let's get started. Hello, Mel. Welcome to the Shugyō Podcast.
Hi, it's great to see you again, Swire. Glad to be here.
Yeah, I've been waiting for this episode to happen. And before I jump too far ahead of myself, I want to ask you about your martial art background. I know that you first started training in Judo. Can you tell us what makes you got into it and what kept you in it, at a higher level?
I guess it would have started after high school. So when I was in high school, I did more track and field, long distance running. But after high school, I was in a point where, I had always wanted to do martial arts, watch the Bruce Lee, watch the Kung Fu movies. And I also had an experience that let me know that I needed to make sure that I could defend myself if I needed to. And so after high school, I was able to, pool the money that I earned over summers and put myself into an academy in Sacramento. And that's where it started. I started with Judo, which was great because I just immediately fell in love with it. It was just very physical. And I mean, you haven't met me in person, but I'm very short. I'm 5 feet. And so what that meant was I had to really, from the get-go, figure out leverages and physics and geometry in a very immediate way. So it was really just mentally gratifying. And it also was just very gratifying from a physical perspective to be able to get more confident as a small female that, had some run-ins that weren't very safe. So it gave me some empowerment there. And then beyond that, I just kept, competing, and I did well in competition. I had some very high level coaches, who mentored me, and, they, from their perspective, they let me know that I had, if I wanted to, I could go further with this. And that kind of really lit the fire, and I went for it.
Yeah. Also, I wanted to touch on that too. It kind of related to the first question that I asked you. Your professional job is a strength coach here at Oakland, Most Powerful. So from reading the bio that you sent me on your competing schedule, it looks like middle through your competitive career that you got into StrongFirst and strength coaching. Is that correct?
Yes. So I started competing at a very high level in Judo, which meant that I needed to spend a lot of time in the gym getting very strong. Because at that level, it's not a matter of who strength trains or not. It's about who trains very scientifically or not, so that you don't show up broken on the mat and you can do what you're supposed to. So after doing the wrong thing for years and having performances that just were very frustrating, to be honest, given the level of training that I was receiving. I figured out that I wasn't doing stuff correctly in the gym. So I found StrongFirst actually through Luis. He was my first kettlebell coach. And once he got certified, he's, spread the word. It pretty much changed his life. And then I thought, wow, I need to study up. So I got certified after that with his help. And then the rest is history. We got our elite status, which means that we got all of the modalities: kettlebell, barbell, and body weight. And that enabled me to train in the gym way more scientifically and way more sustainably for the mileage, so to speak, that I was putting in on the mats with grappling.
Do you notice a difference where you mentioned that you didn't train the right way? Right now you're certified, you have a coach specifically for strength training. Do you notice your skills in judo while after you did the right way increase, and how do you feel different?
Oh, that is such a great question. Yes, hugely yes. As a martial artist, if you were to look at a beginner versus a more advanced athlete, a black belt, for example, you'll notice that maybe they both do a certain move that looks similar, but the beginner will be struggling and be very, very inefficient at the move. The more advanced player will be saving a lot of energy, and it looks kind of effortless.
Yes.
The same goes for strength training. So, for example, if I use myself, I was training in a way that, for example, I would go to failure quite often. I would use loads at high reps that were great for hypertrophy, but in a weight class where I needed to cut weight all the time. So I was doing things that were completely opposite biologically for my needs. And so what it wound up doing, if I were to take that to like a competition, I would really stiffen up. I would grip up with my opponent, and I would be just leaking energy in the first 30 seconds, simply because I didn't have a nervous system that was trained in how to be relaxed while being athletic. And that is something that has completely transformed for me now that I'm training in a different way, because I learned how to do that through StrongFirst. One of the concepts that we learn is dominata. So you are owning the movement, but just enough for the task at hand. You're not overdoing the tension or overdoing the effort in a way that interferes with the athleticism of the task at hand. So the way I train in the gym and the way I, assert my game on the mat are completely related.
So with the technique that you already have learned in judo, with the strength training techniques that you learned from StrongFirst, you actually like to dial in, with this technique, maybe I only need to spend this amount of strength and save myself for later on in the match. Is that kind of like the transition that you notice, once you have trained the right way?
Yeah. You start to have a nervous system that is very intelligent rather than just on or off. So again, if we bring it back to the example of a beginner versus an advanced person, when you're a beginner, you're leaking a lot of energy because you only have effort and non-effort. But the skill of knowing how to adjust your body in just the right way to get leverage to do the effort for you versus muscle, that's a whole universe that takes 10 years to figure out. But the same could be said for how we learn kettlebells or how we learn how to do a body weight exercise that still is very connected, but I don't demolish my joint along the way, or I don't wreck my nervous system through a session of 30 to 40 minutes, right? So again, it's a matter of neurology is involved, mentality is involved, drilling is involved. Whether you're, drilling a move in jiu-jitsu or judo, or drilling a kettlebell swing in a correct way. We have drills for hiking the bell, drills for a dead stop swing, and then continuous swings. So as we learn, there's a lot of neurology to go along with, efficient athleticism and training your body on how to do things well.
Yeah, that's really great answer. And I'm glad that you're able to pick up so many things, and it actually helped you improve your main sports, which is the competition right now. You also mentioned that you have a lot of grit, when you're pursuing your high level competition. At that time, what does the word grit means to you?
Right. So my understanding of grit has evolved quite a bit, just like my understanding of how to train in an intelligent way. Back when I was competing at a very high level internationally, grit was pushing through pain no matter what. And at a certain age, we all can do it for a certain amount of time. It's not sustainable, but there is a certain amount of pain that we push through if we are, like we were talking about earlier. If you're getting paid as a professional athlete, there's a certain amount of that type of grit that is part of the game. But I had several experiences that kind of taught me a way deeper level of grit, and a more intelligent kind of understanding of what grit actually means. For example, when I was living in South Korea, I was training at a university where students majored in judo or majored in taekwondo. It's
Wow.
what you are going to be dedicating your life to. If you weren't coming out as an athlete, you were coming out as a coach. So this is what they slept, ate, lived, breathed. The mentality was you push through because those that survive get to go on and compete. Those that don't become coaches. So you really want to try to do your best, and it's a test of wills. Lots and lots of experiences, but one in particular stands out where I was with the team in our normal morning training, and the coach for some reason was very agitated, and he was asking the team to do 1,000 judo push-ups. And
Wow.
I don't know if your listeners know, judo push-ups are where you are your feet are spread wide. You're almost kind of like in a downward dog position with your feet wide, and you swoop down, you kind of dive down until your chest brushes the floor. You come up, and then you reset your hips back. And it's even for a few, it's challenging. But I mean, like, I had never even counted to 1,000 just on
Any
my,
type of push up a
like,
thousand is a crazy number.
you can't even, like, if you just like sit in a room and try to count to 1,000 in your head, it's just like mind boggling. And then trying to pair a strength movement with that. So and at the time I had a fractured foot, so I was like rocking on this broken foot, trying to grit through, these 1,000 push-ups. But in my mind, this is how I became a champion. And later, I learned that the coach was actually, turns out he was just, frustrated with the team at their performance. And
Mm.
so, he had told me, oh no, just go, you don't have to be here. But I was stubborn. I was like, no, this is how I become a champion. So it's like, I learned a lot about, okay, what about that do I need to take, and what about that do I need to leave? Because I mean, I was training on a broken foot, and that completely demolished my performances there on out for months, until I came back to the US and had to get an x-ray and figure out my recovery routine. So, at what point is it now taking away from your skills acquisition and your evolution of a martial artist and your understanding of biological improvement, and when does it actually help that process?
That's the time when you are trying to make the Olympic team, right? That's the hot
Right.
training that you were going for.
Yeah, yeah. I spent about 8 months living over there in South Korea at that university. Cumulatively. So, 1 month here, 3 months there, adding up to 8. And it was just so formative. I was rubbing shoulders with champions. I was able to just have conversations with world-class coaches, and athletes. It was just, it was a dream. It was an absolute dream. And also, I learned a lot about how not to train for longevity, and how not to train for just good performance, and not because I was necessarily getting told the wrong things, but that's just what people, what my understanding was at the time and what I saw other people doing.
Yeah. So knowing what you know right now, fast forward to today, how do you define grit, especially now you train others, right? For a living. That's what you do for a living. And you also becomes a trainer, instructor for jiu-jitsu. Like how would you use your previous experience to try to guide people at least not to kill themselves, like even if they wanted to?
Absolutely. And that's a big question for a gym owner. So I own Oakland's Most Powerful with Luis. And one of the first things we figured out was, oh, wow, I'm responsible for creating from scratch this culture that is healthy and non-toxic in the health and fitness world. And that's a tall task because you have a lot of people coming in with a lot of assumptions on what health and fitness is or should be, and it is not always effective or healthy. And so there has to be some way of cultivating a culture that is, again, very healthy and not, unhealthy or toxic. So the way I kind of explain, or maybe not in so many words, but the way we kind of guide students through is technique it has to be clean. And the same thing again goes with martial arts. If you're drills are a natural part of the martial artist kind of environment, right? Because we need to create that quote unquote muscle memory. We need to grow the tissues involved with that move. We need to get our bones dense in the way that they need to receive impact, right? So this takes time and neurology and practice and repetition. And then when you have things mastered to a certain level of safety and competence, then you earn your grit. You earn your ability to go hard, or you earn your ability to go heavy. We've developed a sort of belt ranking system for kettlebells. We're still working on kind of building out a barbell way of thinking about it as well. But it's kind of based on your body type, based on your body weight, how strong is strong enough. And so if you're progressing to a certain level for you, maybe that's the 12 for some people, maybe that's the 24 for other bigger people. And then you start progressing and you're mastering the level of technique that we're looking for. And then, look at that bell feels easy and it looks safe and it's feeling great. Now you get to earn your gritty weights, quote unquote. You're the ones that, feel really good because they're hard.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of things that I want to ask, like as a follow-up question, both in martial arts and both in strength training, because you're right. If the technique is there, and then a lot of times technique doesn't build on the first day. It might be 1 year, it might be 10 years, or in some cases in martial arts, it's your whole lifetime. Think about a recent experience. A new student. I practice karate, so we use our hand to strike a lot. We have a punching bag at the dojo. So the white belt, trying to make an attempt to punch the punching bag with no gloves, and then his wrist bent right away. So I told him you need time to build your hand to be able to withstand the force. So maybe try to really punch like 10% just to make impact. So once you get used to it, once you train, I don't know how many punches that you do, that's not really a right number until you build up to your grit, right? Using the word you described, then you'll be able to punch more or punch the right way. Same as, you mentioned the barbell, we saw on TikTok, Instagram, I blame social media, right? Guy just walked up and then casually picked up 1,000 pounds. That's, no challenge. But then if you go to the gym and you try to do that, you're going to hurt yourself and you're going to the hospital. So I think that's a lot of information to unpack with what you just said.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And to your point, social media has done us a lot of favors and a lot has failed us in like super huge ways. We get a lot of people coming in, seeing a challenge that they say, oh, I've never done kettlebells before, but I want to do this super badass, really complex move that doesn't even serve my goals. And, we have to have a conversation about, okay, well, what's your end goal with this? And how can we get you moving safely with something else first so that we can set you up for success instead of saying, yeah, go for it. Because that just won't work out. Same thing also, if we're talking about, so I do strength training and then I do martial arts as a small person, right? So if I'm a small person, and this is a frustration that I hear a lot of and experience also as a small player is, okay, I'm trying to learn this move, but all the people that I'm drilling on, I can't fit my legs around them and then lock my legs. If, for example, I'm trying to learn a triangle, and so again, it relates very much to, the kettlebell world or the strength world, where I need to have a feeling of success with a certain load first, because there needs to be an understanding of position, of effort level, of, how to even breathe correctly. That's a huge one. So to your point, when you're instructing a beginner to, okay, just draw back the effort to like 10%. Let's make sure that you can keep the frame, right? Can you just keep the frame? And then we'll add force through the frame that you've already kind of learned about. But let's not overload the frame that you don't know anything about yet.
Yeah, that's really great advice. But I think the follow-up question then, as a coach, when do you decide to push the student, and when do you ask him or her to pivot? Because you don't want them to kill themselves.
Great question. So I'll give you an example of what we do at our gym. So we have protocols in 8-week cycles. So we program 8 weeks. Everybody's doing the same thing. Week 9 is baseline week. Baseline week is when we check in with, movements that kind of matter the most to us. And usually they're kind of the same ones. So let's say, for example, right now we have a protocol going that involves swings and presses. So swings and overhead presses. In about 4 more weeks, because we're right in the middle, we're going to check in with people's overhead press and their swing. And they're going to be going for a heavier belt, as heavy as they can safely demonstrate, to see, how strong they've gotten over time. And with 8 weeks of patterning, what we see almost without fail is there has been enough neurology involved that they have memorized the pathway. They understand the dominata principle. So just enough effort to not overload their joints or to deviate from their structured path. And they've learned about nervous system regulation. So now when they do their baselines to check back in, well, how heavy can I press now that I've done a press protocol? It's like fitting into a well-oiled groove because they've been doing it over and over for 8 weeks. This is the time that we ask, hey, if you feel like you can try another bell, try it. And then they'll try it. And usually they'll do the next bell up. And then usually they're like, hey, that actually wasn't so bad. I'm going to go one more bell up. We try one more bell up. Maybe they can get like 5. Then, okay, well, if you can get 5, typically that means you can get at least 1 on the next one. And if they need a spot, we'll spot. But like very, very few people need a spot at that point because they're neurologically so primed for safe execution of those movements.
How would you talk to or guide through the ego of a person? Because I know in the first year or two, right, in martial arts or in strength training, your progress is high, right? From nothing just come off from the streets to knowing some skills, you're improving a lot. But at a certain time, then you get not stuck. I would say your progress might not be as fast. Like if you can't just go up belt until you put us 1,000 pounds, it's just not physically possible. So at one point, maybe you train for a year, you can only increase like less than 1%, but these are, some people do go for it and those become champions. Like, how would you see that ego in there? Like, that maybe this time you're not ready to move on, and like, how would you guide them through? I think it's a hard question to ask people to stay, right? If I'm going up, I'm happy, right? If you ask me to stay, so you're saying I'm not good enough?
Yeah, no, actually that's a really good distinction. So what, maybe I'll use myself as an example.
Yeah.
As a beginner, you always have, big jumps, as you said. But at a certain point, those big jumps diminish and you have to reframe to redefine what success is for you, because you're biologically, this is true with strength training. Like the expert is looking for tiny fractions of increased weight, and that is a source of great jubilation, great celebration, right? So the experts celebrate the small wins, the beginners celebrate the big wins. And so I think in my personal experience, that reframing does the job. If you can reframe that, you're going to have a journey that's very sustainable and good in the long haul. With our students, what we find is having a culture that is honors biology above all else. We get really nerdy in our class. That tends to wipe out egos pretty quick, because if we're having conversations all the time about leverages, about nervous system regulation, about, oh, did you feel that? What I noticed is you bent your knees a little too soon. And then they're like, huh, wow. And then you have like this pairing of curiosity and knowledge that there's biology involved. Now we're getting away from the emotional. Not that the emotional is invalid, but we have to include other more active components to what good training actually is. And you can't walk into each session completely training according to your emotions, right? There has to be some biological decision making happening and some neurological decision making happening. So again, with beginners, they're noticing big changes. They're looking to us for guidance on when to move up and when not to. The experts start to get nuanced understandings of like the Turkish get-up. Oh man, you know what? I never made that weight feel as effortless as I did today. I've been able to do it for the last 3 years, but gosh, wow, I made this slight adjustment in my technique, and now I've kind of like reinvented the Turkish get-up for myself. That's a huge win.
Yeah, I think, with what you just said, even though you might not increase in weight or in maybe the, level of fancy things that you could do, right, in martial art example, but you can always improve your technique. You might not go up in weight, but then your technique can be a lot better. Even if you train 10 years within the same weight, for example, then your technique, that you train for 10 years, gotta be a lot better than 10 years ago.
Yeah, great question. I would say that, if I'm talking about strength in a gym, there has to be some level of curiosity and deep understanding of, if I'm doing a movement, what am I doing it for? What load is appropriate for my goals? And what is my long-term journey with this movement? So for example, if I am, for my personal practice, if I'm doing the swing and I'm doing protocols that I jump onto and off of, I know that I'm getting a benefit from this swing if I'm feeling my legs and my abs and my lats rather than my lower back, right? That's really important from a biological perspective, because if I'm loading the wrong tissues, what's the point of the movement, right? If I know that I am, establishing a working bell that is heavy enough, challenging enough, but still manageable. So for me, that's around, if I'm doing one arm swings, that's around the 24 to 28, depending on what's going on that month. And then for two arm swings, maybe 32, 36. So if I'm kind of cruising along at those weights, I know that they are serving me and my practice very reliably, because biomechanically, I'm doing them correctly. And then load wise, they're appropriate for my body, because I've spent a lot of years with the swing and I know that they're serving my mat time. I'm able to have enough hip explosiveness on the mat that I need for competition or to just go against big people. And then, mentally, I know I'm confident because I know the biology. I know that, hey, if I can just keep the 24 and 28 one arm swings feeling manageable, then I'm winning. I don't need to keep growing that movement for my purposes, unless I'm, doing a very specific challenge or certification or something like that. But for my own purposes, I'm very knowledgeable about, okay, that the swings are taken care of if I have these parameters in place. Every single movement in my practice has those same parameters depending on the movement. So again, if I were to kind of summarize it, it's not a bad idea to take a deeper dive into a little bit of biology. And if biology is not your thing, check in with a coach to see, okay, I kind of like this movement and that movement. Does it make
Mhm.
sense to pair them together? Do I have a gap in my training? Should I be training something else? This modality, gosh, it's kind of bugging my shoulder. Do I need shoulder mobility that I'm lacking? Or am I just doing the movement wrong? Or am I doing the movement right and I'm not loading it appropriately to my skill level yet? So, staying curious and just like getting more knowledgeable about what you're doing in the gym is really not a bad idea, because then you can check your ego way early in the process. It doesn't get as frustrating in the long haul.
Do you think that's the point that is most misunderstood by martial artists in strength training? Because, for example, I think safe to say that all martial arts, you have push-up, sit-ups, and running. Those people will do. But then as soon as they go into a gym, they train like a bodybuilder. They don't have a plan. They look at maybe what's the biggest guy or whoever lift the most weight in the room, and they try to mimic them. So that goes into a lot of pain or overloading. Do you think that's the most misconception about strength training among martial artists?
I would agree with that. And using myself as an example, I was totally doing that. I was training like a bodybuilder. I was like, and the craziest thing was I needed to cut weight all the time. So I was training myself to get bulkier and heavier and get that hypertrophy. And you need a certain amount of hypertrophy when you're doing a grappling sport, because
Hmm.
you literally get, like, if we're a bag of bones, you need some muscle and tissue to cushion the forces going through your skeleton all the time. And you need to have joints that are absolutely stable. So a certain amount of hypertrophy in certain ways is really necessary for grapplers, in my experience. But do I need to be like whatever those competitions, Mr. Atlas or whatever? Like there's just no way that is in any way practical for me being able to be athletic on the mat space if I'm just training to failure or training strictly as a bodybuilder. There's no, the neurologies are mismatched for what I'm trying to achieve on the mat versus what I'm doing in the gym. So, as soon as we shift, the way you train with weights to the way you want to perform in life, whether that's just grandma wanting to be able to, play on the floor with her grandkids and be strong enough to pick herself back up again, or, Joe who wants to go backpacking, at pretty high elevations with friends at a pretty fast pace. Like, you want to be able to make sure that what you're doing correlates to what you're trying to do outside of the gym. And that to me was a big shift. I was doing whatever I saw other people doing, and it was usually to failure, reps to failure, and just kind of zapping the nervous system. And you will get strong. I think this is the other kind of part that is very confusing, at least it was to me. You will get strong by doing reps to failure and by training like a bodybuilder. You
Hmm.
will. There's no question about it. But it is not the most efficient way, and it does not have a low biological cost on your body to train that way for the purposes that I needed. So if I'm already putting my joints through a ton of mileage and I need to be strong but not rigid, it was just backfiring like crazy.
So it's just a lot of smart training, right? So you got to be smart, and maybe if you're grappling, you probably need to have stronger grip, or maybe you have to train your hip better to get out of sticky situation, or do a certain movement that you can. Like, is that what you would look at now, trying to programming for your own?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so I'm very minimalistic in my own training. I get real simple real fast. I'm not a very complex person. So for me, what can I do that's sustainable, and what can I do that gets me to some pretty respectable loads without drawing from my need to go to practice tonight? Those are the things that I think about. And again, it kind of comes back to having enough time with a modality to know that, hey, if I own these bells with these movements at these reps and sets, then I'm good to go. So I do a lot of, right now I'm doing a lot of strength endurance, because that's what works for my schedule and for my body right now. Don't be confused about the word endurance. Like I'm using strength type bells. So, I'm again swinging 28 kilogram, bells, maybe 5 on the minute. And that's a very strengthy set. Like if you're doing 5 or less, that's a strength set. But then I'm allowing myself enough rest to recover to be able to do it again at full power, at full, technique again. So yeah, just again, making sure that you know a little bit about what the different training modalities, what it looks like to train for endurance, what it looks like to train for strength. A lot of people combine the two and wind up doing, high intensity interval training, which again is very effective for certain goals. But if you're trying to have a low biological cost and you're doing that only all the time, you're zapping your nervous system, and then you're making your ability to be precise lower by doing, reps to failure, which then again, if I'm a martial artist and I'm going to training, like my ability to be precise is sacred on the mat. It means the difference of me, a millimeter off and I'm like tweaking a shoulder, or a millimeter off and I'm losing my match,
Yeah, it's just so hard of a question to answer, right? You have to look at so many things, and there are so many things that we can't be expert on every single thing. So maybe you're really good martial artist, but then you really know nothing or too much about strength training. So it makes sense to hire a coach or even seek the right advice, right? Don't scroll on Instagram, right? Then you can just saving your shoulder or saving your knees.
Yeah, I guess, yeah, if I were to give it a tip, yeah, get a little bit of coaching. A little bit of coaching would go a long way. Whether you're a barbell person or a kettlebell person or a body weight person, have what your goals are very clear. And then, going to a coach that can take those goals and, say, hey, okay, great. So you're doing this, really interesting series of movements with a very, very light bell. Well, no wonder this isn't carrying over to your hiking, because you're going to be basically rucking a 40-pound thing on your back, and you need to do some strength training for your core. Where's your strength training for your core and for your legs? And I think if I were to give a little bit of advice, a little bit of coaching goes a long way to just get a clear direction. And then you can, go in that direction on your own, once you learn good technique or learn what movements would match your goals. I'd say for grapplers, if you're doing, working your way towards one-arm swings with, again, really good technique and Turkish get-ups, and then, making sure that you're covering your bases. If you're lacking some general strength, getting a 2 times body weight deadlift is not a bad idea, just for some foundational strength. Like those are going to go a long way.
I want to say and ask you this final question and answer it any way that you like. If Mel today, speaking to the younger Mel, chasing the Olympic dream, how would you program her strength training routine today?
Oh, great question. I would put more weight on the bar and do way less reps. And I would scale my effort on the track. So we would do a lot of running. We would do a lot of, other conditioning things.
Right.
I was a champion at those. I could outwork anybody. I would scale back my effort way, way, way more, so that I preserved, the precision that I needed, and the strength that I needed for the training practice that was supposed to happen in the afternoon. so that I could just learn the most in the most precise way on the mat, instead of dragging myself onto the mat and then learning poor technique and thinking that, okay, well, the effort was high, so therefore I'm working my way towards a championship.
That's actually a really good point, because you are keeping the young version of you in more focus, because you are there to train for judo, right? To go to the Olympics, and you're not going to train there for track and field or be the fittest person in the world, right? So
Right.
why leave everything on the track, because you have to train in your own main training? So like strength training is a accessory, right, to what your goal would be, and it's not. You don't have to leave it all at the track or in a strength room. Like you are doing that as a help, right, for your other activities that you want to do.
Right, exactly. And working up to certain loads, if they're very, very high for what you're trying to do, make no sense, depending on what you're trying to do. Like makes no sense for me to try to work my way to deadlift 400 pounds if I'm trying to compete in jiu-jitsu, or just have a good jiu-jitsu practice. It just makes no sense to try to divide your biology that way. So keep the goal. I think, that's a great way of putting it, and making sure that your strength practice supports your outside the gym goal in a really organic and sensical way.
Yeah, because I think people always say, and I think it's again the social media, right? The tagline will be, go big or go home. So every time that we think we train, we have to go big, go to failure. If we're not on the ground, huffing and puffing at the end, you're not doing a good workout. It doesn't have to be like that. Like Mel was saying, you just do enough for your purpose and be happy with it. So if there's always tomorrow, there's always next time. You don't have to leave it all, and you're not training to be a bodybuilder.
Right. Yeah. I mean, right now I'm doing swings, get-ups, and goblet squats. That's my program right now.
That's
I'm not
simple
doing
as they could take. Yeah.
Yeah, it's the simple and sinister right now. And then with a little bit of, goblet squats to fill that gap. But, it really, it's simple is usually best when it comes to people who have goals outside the gym, and who have goals to live their best independent living life at age 90. Something that's simple and effective and sustainable.
Yeah, and also easier technique too. You could do it more often. So the more
Mhm.
that you could spend on a certain skills, the better that you will be. Because for us in sparring too, we don't want it to go out 100% and kill each other. Then you won't have a sparring partner anymore. So like we even go super light, but we focus on our technique so that we could actually be on the mat, get some time in to interact with each other, but we're not killing ourselves. So like you in grappling too, if you always go hard and choke people to death, then either no one wanted to grapple with you, or you're just not helping yourself by going 100% every single time.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, we can regulate ourselves in training by doing flow. There's flow rolling, and not a whole lot of people know how to do it well, to be honest. But it's a way of rolling with someone where you are not focusing on to the death, submitting them and tapping them out, but your goal is to switch positions as often as possible, which means that you can't fixate and hold somebody down in a pin. You have to move to the next position, which means that you literally kind of achieve this flow state with this person where you achieve maximal amount of transitions and positions, and strategies. And it's kind of like just speed learning with an opponent. And it's
Hmm.
really, really gratifying. And you leave with your nervous system completely intact. You feel great. It's amazing. And then, maybe that's in strength training world, we want light, medium, and heavy spread throughout the week. So that's a light day. If you're choosing, partners that know how to do that well, or you're training with partners more your size, chances are you're getting some good light to medium loads for your body that day that are very precision oriented, and means you can just walk in the next day and just have a great session again, instead of having to wait 2 days because you've got all this soreness and sore joints and pain. You can't even turn your head. That's very common, right? And so same thing with strength students. We have people come in the beginning who are a little bit addicted to that soreness, because to them it signifies that they are getting stronger and they've completed an effective training session. But biologically speaking, yes, again, you will get strong if you get, a lot of acidosis in the muscles, right? But it's kind of like Pavel gave a really good analogy one time. It's kind of like, let's say we have a coffee shop and our business is good. We want to expand a little bit. Mm-hmm. So I want to, add a room. So instead of just busting down that one wall to construct the room next to that building, I'm just going to take a baseball bat and knock down the entire building and reconstruct the whole thing from scratch, bigger. You're going to get a bigger building either way. You're going to get a stronger body either way, but there's a very high biological cost to one of those ways. And it's going to be a lot of strain on those workers. It's going to be completed in longer time, because you can't do that sustainably.
For listeners who wanted to reach out to you to learn more about your journey and then your strength training, what would be a good way to get in touch with you?
Oh, good question. So our website is a great place to start, oaklandsmostpowerful.com. That's where we do our strengthy stuff. We do workshops. So on our events page, you can keep up with the events that we're doing. We do in-person stuff, but we also do remote coaching. So there's some students that I work with who are not in California, and we just do programming. Other than that, on Instagram, I'm mo.throws, and you can find me on Instagram that way as well.
I'll put all the show notes that you could reach Mel. And Mel, thank you so much for coming on to the show today. I learned a lot, and then it got me thinking about my own unique, and you touch on a few points that I, secretly agreeing.
Amazing. Well, yeah, this has been such a pleasure, Swire. Thank you for asking such great questions. Those were awesome questions you asked.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Our guest for this episode is Melissa Templeman. She's a former international level judo competitor who was ranked number 3 in the United States at 52 kilos while training to make the U.S. national team during the Rio Olympic cycle. Along that journey, she began to question how strength training could better support performance on the mat instead of taking away from it. That search led her to StrongFirst, where she became a StrongFirst Elite instructor and later achieved the Iron Maiden and Sinister standards. Today, Melissa is a strength coach, co-owner of Oakland's Most Powerful Gym, and a Jiu-Jitsu black belt, and IBJJF Masters World Champion. In this conversation, we talk about strength as a skill, the right relationship with grit, and what martial artists should understand about training for the long game. Let's get started.